QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021, adjusting entry and reversing entry journal reports. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars homepage. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view dropdown, selecting the open windows list. We're going to start off opening up our standard financial statement reports, and then we'll go into our reports that will be showing our adjusting entries. So we're going to go to the reports dropdown, open up the company and financial, go on down to the balance sheet standard, changing the date up top to 02/28/21. Then we're going to go to the reports up top, go on down to the company and financial, pick up the profit and loss, the P and L, dates from 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. And there's our P and L. Now, in prior presentations, we have been entering the adjusting entries. So these are going to be the adjusting entries. Now, logistically, you want to think about how are you going to be entering the adjusting entries into the system. We've been entering them into QuickBooks as we go, basically one by one, the adjusting entries and then the reversing entries. If you work with an accounting firm, they might be doing a worksheet such as this, working with the entries outside of the system, and then you might enter them all in to QuickBooks at one time, just entering in all the adjusting entries. Or if you're a bookkeeper and you do the adjusting entries in, say, a backup copy of the QuickBooks file, then it will not be in the client copy original file, and you might then want to be printing these journal entries out so that the client can then put them into their own file. You might want to run a report for those journal entries. Or if you have the journal entries input either yourself or by the client, you may ask them to, hey, could you run me a report, or I would like to run a report that shows those entries to make sure that they're input in the correct fashion. So in other words, at the end of the day, what you want to do is put in the adjusting entries and then check the trial balance that ties out to your worksheet or to what you have in your QuickBooks file after you enter the adjusting entries to make sure you're at the same starting point going forward. If you are not, then you're going to have problems in the next year when you do the taxes or the financial statements. The retained earnings won't tie out, and you'll have to do a retained earnings basically adjustment, which is it's not that bad, but you got to do that if that happens. So what you want to do is get this thing tied out. Okay, so that's what we'll do now. We're gonna look at the report that will then show these entries that we've put in place, which is a little bit more complex to do within QuickBooks. So let's think about how we could do that. If we go back over to QuickBooks, my goal here is to generate a report that just shows me my adjusting entries and then my reversing entries. So what report can I do to do that? Well, they're all in there as of journal entries. They're all journal entry types, even though we used the register. So let's see if we could take advantage of the type of format of entry that we had, and they're all in there as of the same date. That's why we put them in there at the same date, so we can kind of group them together as well. So I'm going to go to the reports drop down. We're going to go to the accounting and taxes, and let's go down to the journal report. We want to take a look at the journal report, and I'm going to say okay on that one. And we'll change the dates. Now we can pick up the dates. That's our first kind of filter that we can have, because all the adjusting entries are in there as of the end of the time period, in our case, the end of the month. So they're going to be in there as of 02/28/21, unless we misdated it something, and then 02/28/21, so one day. Now, we have a whole lot of stuff going on that day because that was the end of the month, so there's a lot of other stuff going on, so we have more than just our journal entries, so it's like, that didn't filter it as much as we wanted it to. But we can see down here that we do have our journal entries by type. So the next thing is, well, I got all this other, like paychecks are in here in journal entry format. Notice what this report does, which is kind of nice. If you want to analyze different different transactions, you can go into this report and look at like a paycheck, and you can see the debits and credits, and you can kind of learn your debits and credits or think about debits and credits of more complex transactions by using a report like this. But I don't want that right now. I just want like the adjusting journal entries. So I want these ones down here. Those are the ones I want. So we might be able to filter by the type then, because this is a journal entry as opposed to a check. So what if I could filter by this column? You could sort by this column possibly, but I'd like to filter by the column. So we're going to go to the customized reports up top, and I'm going to say, let's see if I can add a filter. I want to filter by the type, transaction type. So I want to filter by the transaction type. Let's see what we have here. There it is, transaction type. And then I want to make it just the journals. So notice it says journal here, and this is going to be a little confusing because down here it says general journal. Sometimes QuickBooks uses slightly different terminology for this. I wish they would, but in any case, they have general journal here, and in here they shortened it to just journal. So you're looking for the journal, which represents this type of a general journal. And then I'm going to say that's the only filter I want. So let's go ahead and say OK. And there we have it now. So now it's a lot better. It's not perfect, because I still have this one up top, which I entered for the equipment, the purchase of equipment, which happened to be a journal entry because there was no cash involved. So this was a journal entry, but and that's still included here. I don't want that one, but all the rest of them are adjusting entries, and we can see that by the ADJ entry. That's why we want to put that in the memo section. So here's all the adjusting entries, and we should be able to tie that out basically to our adjusting entries over here. So if you were to take your system, your QuickBooks system, enter it into your Excel journal entries, enter it into the QuickBooks system, then you'd want to double check this column on your trial balance. So I'd go into here, double check the trial balance, and then if there's any problems, you want to print the journal entries. So let's open up the trial balance and just double check that. If I go to the reports drop down, accounting and taxes, trial balance, changing the dates from 01/01/21 to 02/28/21, we should be able to go basically line by line on this trial balance. I'm going to set this side by side with our trial balance over here, and we're concentrating on this column and be able to see this going down. So there's the 108,504, the 14,142, the 944, that looks good, the 1500, the credit, that's a credit represented by brackets, so 5,000. That looks good. 98, 65, 1,000, 56. And it's worthwhile to do this. I know this is somewhat of a tedious task, but it's worthwhile to do this because that's going to help you to not have a problem when you roll this thing over into the following period. So notice this one had those two sales tax, so these two should add up to that 307. And in this instance, notice this is another area where it might be better on our side to have added two accounts instead of keeping the one account. But in any case, you got the sales tax, the 288 plus the 19. That's going to be the 307, so that looks good. And then we've got the 300 here. And then let's move this down a bit. And so we've got the 65. That's the owner investment. So we are down in the owner investment is the 65, the 500, the 77, the 15, the 8250, the 40,094, the 6680. That looks good. That looks good. Looks good. Looks good. Looks good. Looks good, looks good, looks good, looks good, looks good, looks good. And looks good and looks good. So that's how you kind of want to double check running down on that. And then you should have your journal entries. If that doesn't match out, then you're going to take a look at your journals over here and tie those out to the journals that were provided. That will be these items, and you're looking at just the adjusting entries, not the reversing entries here. Those entered as of the cutoff date. And then if there's any problems, you want to adjust the dates and see if the journal entry was entered basically at the wrong date. Extend the dates to see if you can pick up the journal that was recorded or misrecorded. So there we have that transaction. And then once I export this to Excel, also I can kind of adjust it a little bit more and delete this one journal entry up top, which I don't need. And then we might want the journal entries for the reversing entries. So I'm going to run this report again for March 1st so we can see the reversing entries. So we're going to go to the reports drop down, accounting and taxes. We want to take a look at the journal report. I'm going to say OK here. And we're going to change the dates this time for 03/01/21, 03/01/21. And so there we have it. Let's go ahead and customize the reports up top. We're going to go to the filters and do the same thing. I'm going to do it a little bit faster, going down to the transaction type. And then I want to be picking up the journal type of activity and okay. This one shouldn't have too much going on because we haven't entered much for March, obviously. So these are all going to be basically the journal reports here. So these should be our reversing entries, which should be tying out to our reversing entries here. So, and these are the ones that are marked reversing. So there we have it. So those are going to be our reports. So you want to check your works. I would check your trial balance if you're at this point in time. Check out your balance sheet. Check out your profit and loss, or more easily, check out your trial balance. And then if there's any problems, you want to take a look at the journals and practice creating these journal reports so that you can communicate these journal reports when necessary. You want to be able to isolate the journal entries. So let's go ahead and export these now. We're going to practice our exporting process and just put this all into one sheet that we could use basically for a review type purpose. So I'm going to be printing out the balance sheet, the income statement, the trial balance, and then our 2 journal reports. So I'll go up to the balance sheet. We'll do this in our standard process. We'll save it as a PDF file. Then we'll save it as an Excel file. Then we'll create one long PDF file from the Excel file. So I'm going to go to the print reports. I'm going to use the Qt PDF printer to print these out. And I should probably format it. Let me format it a little bit. I'll just get rid of these items and I'll put the negative numbers in brackets. Customize reports. I'm going to go to the header and footer. We're going to get rid of the date, time, report basis, fonts, and numbers. We're going to then go to the red and parentheses. I'll keep the decimals right now because that might make it a little bit easier to be more exact when doing these adjusting entries. So I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to go ahead and print this. So we're going to say print, report, and I'm going to print it on that to the PDF. Print it to the PDF and then say okay. It's going to ask me where do I want to put it pretty soon here, and I'm going to say that we want to put it in our data files, quick GGG data files, and adjusting entries, and then I'm going to put it right there, and I'm going to say this is going to be our balance sheet. Once again, you might want to put the year if you're sorting this by date, the year, then the month, then the day. But I'm just going to put balance sheet, and then 022821 and save that one. And then I'll export it to Excel as well. So I'm going to go to Excel, create a new Excel worksheet. We're going to be putting it in, or no, this is going to be a new workbook as well. And then all sheets that we make after this will be going to this workbook that we are creating now. So it's going to be in a new workbook, export. We're going to do our adjusting by going to the page layout view. I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to go to the view drop down, or the view up top. We're going to go to the Windows group, remove the split panes. I'm going to go back to the previous view, and I'm going to go back to the first tab, right click on it and delete that tab. Say OK or delete, double click on the sheet name, and I'm just going to call it BS for balance sheet. And let's save the worksheet now. I'm going to go to the File tab up top. We're going to go to Save As, and then I'm going to go to the Browse item and put this into our data folder. So that's going to be, mine is currently on the desktop. We have the GGG data folder, section 10. And I'm just going to call this adjusting entries. Let's just call it adjusting entries and worksheets. So sheets. Okay, there we go. And so there we have that. I'm going to say yes and close this back out. And let's do this for the rest of them. I'm going to go to the profit and loss. We'll do the same thing here. Notice the journal entries, we might need a little bit of formatting. So you might want to wait to go there. You might say, I've done this before. I know how to print the reports, but the journal entries will have to do a little bit of formatting too, possibly. So you might want to take a look at that, or fast forward to there if you so choose. So we're going to then be printing this one out. I'm going to print this report using the Qt PDF printer. Qt PDF printer for the P&L, the profit and loss, asks me where I want to put it. I'm going to put my cursor right under the P&L, and this is going to be I'm just going to call it profit and loss, and this is going to be as of 02.28.21. So we'll save that. Let's export it to Excel, export, creating a new worksheet, but this time putting it to the existing workbook that we created last time. So we're going to say it's going to go into the existing workbook. Let's browse to make sure it's going to the right spot. It's not going to the right spot right now. I'm going to fix it. It's going to go into 10, and we want to pick up the adjusting entry and worksheet report. I have two there. I'm going to remove one, and then I'm going to export that. So let's export it. There we have it. I'm going to move this tab to the right. So I'm going to move that to the right, double click on it. I'm going to call that P. Let's call it P and L. And then I'm going to go to the second tab over here and say OK. And remove the splits, go into the view up top and removing the page splits. So we'll do that, unclicking that. And then I'm going to go back to the prior tab, So there we have it. I'm going to go back to the first tab, right click on it and delete it and say delete. Back to the P and L. That looks good. I'm going to close this back up and say save. Let's do it the same for the trial balance now. So let's go to the TB trial balance. Here we have that. I'm going to be same process here. I'm going to say let's print that item and print the report as a PDF, and I'm going to say print it. It's going to ask me where do we want to put it. It's going to be going to the correct spot, so that looks good. I'm just going to call this a trial balance. So trial balance 02.28.21. and save that. Then I'll export it up top, go into Excel, create the Excel worksheet. It's going to go to the existing workbook, but we're going to be putting it, it's going to go to an existing workbook, and we're going to have it in an existing workbook, but a new worksheet. Browse, it should be going to the right spot this time, so I'm just going to export it. And so there we have it. So we've got the balance sheet, and notice it didn't go to the proper report. It went to the financial statements. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to do it again. I tried to not check it. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm not going to save it. I'm going to close it, and it's going to say, do you want to save it? I'm going to say no, because you went to the wrong spot. Try it again. We're going to export again. It's going to go to an existing worksheet. I'm going to browse this time, and it's going to the wrong spot. I don't know why I would think it would go, but I want this one. I want it to go to the adjusting entries and worksheet, and that's the one I want. And so then we're going to export it. So that looks good. So that's the right sheet now. So I'm going to pull this one to the right. I'm going to delete the item in the front. Going to say delete that. Go back to the sheet, double click on it, call this TB for the trial balance. I'm going to go to the second view, and then say OK. And then we'll go up to the view up top in the Windows group, split, unsplit, back to the normal view. So there we have that. And let's close this back out and say save, yes. Then I'm going to go to the journals, the two reports. So I'll start with, I want to pick up the one that is the adjusting entries first. So this is the adjusting entries report. I'm going to modify this a bit by deleting this first item, which isn't an adjusting entry when I export it to Excel. So I can't really do it here. So I can't do it when I print it, but I can do that when I export it to Excel. So I'm going to say print. And this one, before I print it, we might want to change the name to it too. This one's another one. We could adjust the name for it. So let's go to the Customize Reports up top and go to the header and footer. Instead of just journal, these are the adjusting entries. Adjusting entries, we'll get to the date, time, and print, and then time here. We'll get rid of that. Fonts. We can make the red numbers for negatives and brackets, parentheses. Okay, and say okay. So that looks good. Now let's print it. Print report. And we're going to print it to the Qt PDF printer. Printing to the Qt PDF printer. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to bring this on under here. This are going to be the adjusting entries. So these are adjusting entries 02.28.21. And save that one. Then we'll export it to Excel. Excel, we're going to create a new worksheet. And we'll use an existing workbook. I'm going to browse this time since it went to the wrong spot last time. I think it's going to the right spot this time, so that looks good. And then we'll export it. I'm going to maximize the screen. I'm going to pull this to the right. And then I'm going to go to the first tab, right-click on it, delete it. Say delete, go back to the sheet, double-click on it. This is going to be ADJ entries, entries. And then we got to do a little bit of formatting here. So let's go to the second tab or the second view, say OK. And then I'm going to go to the view up top, Windows, split, remove the splits, go back to the first view. And then I can see where the page break is now. So we got to do a little bit of formatting here. First of all, I don't need this first journal entry because it's not an adjusting entry. It's not indicated by the memo. So I'm going to put my cursor on the 2 row and I'm going to select down to 2 to 4, right click, and then delete those rows. And then I don't want the total down here because it's not useful. So I'm going to click on the total, right click, and delete. So we'll delete that. And then this column A is not useful at all. So I'm going to select that column and delete it. And then we might want to put this in a landscape view. So I'm going to go to the page layout. We're going to go to the orientation and make it landscape. And then now it looks like it fits. If it did not fit at that point, then we could delete all these added columns like A, I'm holding down Control, D, E, H, J, M, N, and P. Right click on those items, delete them. So I could delete that. And some of these columns don't seem to need to be so big. This memo column, I can make that smaller. So we could do some of that. And I can try to go back to my orientation and put it portrait. And now it fits on a portrait. So I don't even need to go to landscape on it. So I'm going to say, okay, let's close that up. And say, yes, let's save that. Let's go to the next one. This is for our reversing entries. So let's change the title of this one. I'm going to customize it. And let's go to the headers and footers. Get rid of the date prepared, the time prepared. We're going to call it reversing entries. And fonts, we'll make this red, parentheses. That looks good, and okay. Let's print it. Printing using the Qt PDF printer. We're going to say print that out. And it's going to ask us where do we want to put it. It's going to the right spot, so I'm just going to change the name down below. These are going to be reversing entries. Save it. Let's export it now to Excel. Excel, create new worksheet. It's going to go into an existing workbook. I think it's going to the right spot this time, so I'm going to chance it again. I'm not even going to check it this time. And I'm going to say okay. And there we have it. Looks like the right one this time. The risk paid off. That saved me like a couple seconds without checking it. I live dangerously. I'm going to go to the first tab, right click on it, delete, and then say delete. And then we're going to move this sheet to the right. And these are going to be double click on it. These are going to be reversing entries. Let's do some formatting here. Go into the second view. Okay. And then I'll get rid of the splits. View up top, split screen, back to the first view. And then we can adjust this. I'll try to keep it, instead of going landscape, I'll try to keep it portrait because that's what we did last time. So normally if this page cutoff was here, you'd go portrait to landscape. But let's try to keep it portrait. We're going to say, okay, let's just remove these added columns. This one, don't need that, don't need E. I'm holding down Control to select non-adjacent columns or columns that are not right next to each other. And so we're going to be selecting these. The book calls them non-adjacent columns when I used to teach Excel, which sounds highly technical. And then we're going to right-click on the selected area, and we're going to delete those. And so there we have it. And then you could minimize any columns necessary, but they look good. So we're going to save that so that this looks good. And then we might want to print all this on one PDF sheet. So to do that, we go to the File tab up top. We're going to use our Qt PDF printer to do that. So we're going to go to Print. And then I want to make sure to print the entire workbook. So we're going to print the entire workbook. We're going to be using our Qt PDF printer to do it. So balance sheet, profit and loss, trial balance, adjusting entries, reversing entries. None of it's cut off, so one column is on another page or anything like that, so that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and print it. I'm going to print that out so we can show it to someone in a nice organized fashion. And it's going to ask me where we want to put it. It's going to the right place. I'm going to save it there. So let's go and then see what we have now. Let's see what we have. We've got the data files, and we put it into section 10. So I'm going to make the view large. I want to make some big icons. Big icons for my bad eyes. And then I'm going to go to new and folder. And this could be the adjusting entries. And so how can we provide this to somebody else? Well, we can give them an attachment. We can attach these multiple reports to it. So we might have, say, the balance sheet, the P&L, the reversing entry, and the trial balance, and the adjusting entries. We can do them one at a time, or we can put them into one folder, right-click on that folder, send it to a compressed folder so that we can at least compress them. And then we may also give them our adjusting entry worksheet, the Excel worksheet, depending on who we are dealing with. Or we can simply give them our adjusting entry worksheet and then give them this one PDF file, which would include all the reports on the one PDF file, which I think is the most convenient way to receive the data, right? So then you just got your balance sheet, the second half of the balance sheet, the profit and loss. We didn't do the formatting here as much as we could have, but that's okay. And then we're going to say that we have the trial balance, and then the adjusting entries and the reversing entries.